You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
Alrighty, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and joined as always by your co-host, Alex. Kevin's not going to be with us tonight. He's got a little JOB and all of that going on. But Alex, how are we doing tonight?
I am good. Appreciate you guys holding down the fort for me last week when I had the JOB interfering with this fun thing that we get to do on a weekly basis. I'm excited. It's been a pretty wild last 48 hours, I guess, with the NFL league year kind of opening up the legal tampering period, right? Like none of this stuff has actually happened, but it will happen when the league year starts over again. And just the free agency, the trades that have happened, it's been certainly an interesting ride.
Right. And it's always struck me so funny when they talk about the legal tampering type of thing, because all of these teams get in so much heat and so much of the hoopla around not legal tampering. And really, you hear a story or two come about that on every offseason. In fact, you see teams lose draft picks because of it, or so on. People get fined for it. All of this kind of hullabaloo. But you know what? During these 3 days, go for it.
Yeah, knock yourselves out. That way we can not have to worry about it. Teams know what they're doing when it comes up. I kind of like it. It gives us something to talk about that second week of March right before Selection Sunday, where we all kind of forget about the NFL for 2 weeks, or at least 2 weekends, or 3-4 weekends, I guess it would be. And then we can get back into the draft. So it's a nice little, they found a nice little niche, right? The combine's over. Teams kind of know, okay, here's what the rookie class is going to look like. Here's what we might be able to target when we get to the draft. Here's what we should probably address, because we're not going to address those needs through the draft. And so it's nice little couple day window here where we get to talk about free agency and all the crazy moves that happen. And then for 3 or 4 weekends, we don't think about the NFL, and then we can start thinking about the NFL again, because that national championship game plays, and then we're 2 or 3 weeks away from the draft.
Right. Absolutely. So, but no, it's just one of those that always kind of struck me as odd that we're going to just define it as legal tampering.
Legal tampering. Yeah. It's a fun phrase, right?
Right. When it's quite frankly, just, this is the way business is done and always has been done type of thing.
It's a way to make sure that all our T's are crossed and our I's are dotted when we can actually do all this crap.
Yes. Although by, looking at that, it's more like they crossed their I's and dotted their T's, but semantics, I guess.
Sometimes, yes.
Sometimes, exactly. So anyway, some interesting signings that have come about there. Maybe some surprises that came about. Last year, going into this time frame, really not any real big big name running backs on the market, because everybody had been franchise tag, and this year nobody gets franchise tag, and everybody is kind of shaking things up and maneuvering as that comes through.
Do you remember last year, like all those running backs got on like a group chat or whatever it was, because everybody started to revolt against the NFL, and we've got a running back problem, and like the NFL, like legitimately all these guys got franchise tagged and were making not horrible money, right? But certainly not money that you would expect the open market would pay them, should they, choose to, to explore those options. But it's kind of funny how like all those running backs got tagged, and shouldn't be a surprise then that this year all of these running backs are like, screw you, I'm out of here. Like I'm not sticking around with you. I'm out of here. We're going somewhere else. And so we have seen a lot of these running backs make moves. I'm quite frankly, it makes total sense to me.
And every one of those running backs, but one, making less per year now than the franchise tag that they were placed on the year prior. So very, very interesting there as some of that plays out there, right? Like outside of Saquon Barkley, I guess, and Josh Jacobs, both of which who got about $12 million a year, which kind of in line with what they were what they were doing last year on the tag, a little bit more there. But Tony Pollard signing for $8 million, Derrick Henry, DeAndre Swift, both of those guys signing right around $8 million per year. So
tough.
Yeah, definitely some interesting moves as that plays out there.
Hard to feel sad for somebody making $8 million. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't get theirs. Like these are millionaires, fighting with billionaires over money. So it's hard sometimes to feel sympathy for them. But I think this podcast has been pretty much pro player getting theirs, right? That's the mindset of this podcast since its inception is we love when a player gets theirs, but there are worse ways to make $8 million a year, right?
Well, I just would like to get that kind of money, period. So
yeah.
Anyway,
in my professional career, have I made $8 million?
The answer is no.
No, I have not.
No, the answer is no.
Not even close.
Lifetime earnings still not. Nope.
You could give me $7.5 million, and I don't think that my lifetime earnings would get me to $8 million.
There we go. So, definitely some kind of interesting things playing out there, right? And just kind of kick it off here. What was probably the biggest shocker for you with the NFL free agency kind of kicking off with the legal tampering?
So I'll give you two. That they both actually are running backs. And realistically, I guess it's all the running backs kind of moving around. But Josh Jacobs going to Green Bay, obviously that opened the door that Green Bay then, was able to make Aaron Jones expendable, right? So those are the dominoes that fall. So Jacobs going to Green Bay, I think, was kind of a shocker because I didn't think that Green Bay would really need a running back like Josh Jacobs when they had, Aaron Jones in play there, already. So that was an interesting one to me. And then maybe Austin Eckler going to Washington, for non-quarterback stuff. I think Austin Eckler going to Washington was a big surprise to me. They had a good thing going there, and I know that the offense is probably going to change there in LA. And look, Jim Harbaugh is not everybody's cup of tea, right? So I can understand why maybe a change of scenery. You go to who's going to pay you, but is Washington the best place where you think you're going to be able to win? I don't know. Right. That's a tough division, man. The Cowboys are really good. The Eagles have been really good, and so I don't know that was kind of a head scratcher of all the places that he could have gone to, that he could have made an impact. Going to Washington was the most interesting one. And then obviously the quarterback stuff, but we can get to that in just a second.
Right. Well, and just kind of sticking in the running back vein there, right? Like Austin Eckler to Washington, Cliff Kingsbury, the OC there now. We didn't really see, back with the skill set Austin Eckler has utilized tremendously well out in Arizona during Kingsbury's time there, and in college, under Kingsbury at Texas Tech. I don't know that they knew what a running back was. So certainly he's got the pass catching chops and some of that, and James Conner certainly had some productive years out in the desert with Kingsbury from a fantasy perspective, but that was one of those that kind of was like, oh, okay, interesting. Some of the other thing too that was kind of interesting was a lot of these guys staying in the same division even and just changing teams. And it's an interesting thing when you see players do that, because for the players, for the most part, I don't think that it really necessarily they buy into some of these rivalries and some of that kind of stuff outside of outside of some of these very heated ones where it's it is personal between this guy and this guy on the other side of the ball, that type of thing. But as far as some of these other rivalries, yes, they're there, but sometimes I don't know that necessarily translates all the way through the locker room, if that makes sense. So.
Yeah, Aaron Jones going to the Vikings, right?
Right.
The Vikings and the Packers is one of the, I mean, it's right there with Eagles, Cowboys, right? Like those two teams, those two fan bases, they don't like each other. And it's worse for Packers, Vikings, because those people, they live right next to each other. You know, Eagles, Cowboys, they got some space in between, Texas and Pennsylvania. But that one was certainly interesting. And I don't know, do you want to get into quarterbacks here?
Yeah, we sure can.
All right. So I'll ask you, because I got thoughts on it. Kirk Cousins is the man when it comes to secured money. Kirk Cousins has made something like $400 million in like guaranteed money. The guy has won one playoff game in 12 years. He's 35 years old. He's coming off a torn Achilles. He just signed for 4 years and just got another $100 million guaranteed, or whatever it was. But like, it is insane how people just keep paying Kirk Cousins. And don't get me wrong, Kirk Cousins is good, right? He's serviceable. Is he going to be that good down in Atlanta? I don't know. Does he have a Justin Jefferson or an Adam Thielen down there that can cover a lot of mistakes?
He's got 3 top 10 first round draft picks over the last 3 years on the offensive side of the ball to play with. So.
But Kirk Cousins was really good. He was really good. He was not great, but he was really, really good. Especially for fantasy. Like the guy was just a sniper when it came to like consistency, right? But I mean, when it translated to, real life wins and losses, he got teams there, but he never got them past, right? So like that's what drives me crazy. Look, that's a winnable division down there, right? Like that division is a who's who of, what 8 and 9 team is going to make it out of there and piss somebody off and get a home game against a wild card team that's way better and shouldn't be playing on the road in the first round. Like that's what that NFC South is. But I can understand going down there. I understand when, if a team's going to throw that much money at you. I just don't understand why a team throws that much money at that guy. 35 years old, coming off an Achilles tear, and played with 2 really, really good pass catchers in Minnesota. That he's not going to have that luxury down in Atlanta.
I mean, Justin Jefferson at this point, arguably the best receiver in the league, right? Like there's a couple of other guys that you could make the case for, things like that, but certainly one of the standards and kind of the pinnacle that everybody looks up to when they're comparing the wide receiver position right now. But Drake London, top 10 draft pick. We've seen some flashes from him down there, right? Kyle Pitts, the big athletic guy that, we haven't necessarily seen it all come together, but maybe what's been missing there is a quarterback to it. You got Bijan Robinson, who is the most touted running back in years coming out of there that can both run the ball and catch the ball. And we've seen, we saw what Dalvin Cook did with Kirk Cousins there. So there's a lot to be said there, but you're right with the kind of the king of contracts, so to speak. Certainly kind of is that Kirk Cousins, who at the end of the contract he just signed, career earnings wise would be up there at just south of $412 million.
And like 400 million of that was like guaranteed money, right? Like it was not.
There was a good. Out of the contract he signed, or that he signed in there, this one out of the 180 million, 100 million of it is guaranteed money.
Is his money. I think that. Look, and maybe we don't know what Drake London or Kyle Pitts can be because they haven't had adequate quarterback play down there, right? Like maybe
if they had a quarterback, Raheem Morris probably wouldn't be there.
Right? Like he said as much.
Right. When the head coach comes in there and goes, Hey, listen, I don't know if y'all know this or not, but if we had a competent or we had quarterback play here the last few years, I probably wouldn't be here.
I probably wouldn't be here.
I mean, you talk about two quarterbacks 2 years in a row for fantasy purposes that managed to get really close to top 10 performances for fantasy purpose until they essentially got benched and yanked. Both Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ridder back-to-back years putting up really good performances in a fantasy cumulative space until getting the hook. And all of that, typically coming off of rushing touchdowns and a little bit of groundwork. But the passing offense just didn't work.
Yeah. I don't know. I just that one was a head scratcher. And then obviously, his replacement, his heir apparent, which this feels like the Vikings are going to draft a quarterback, right?
Yeah.
Like this feels like you bring somebody in just so you have somebody week one, just in case whatever you draft doesn't work. So Sam Darnold goes to Minnesota. That one's interesting. There's a few other ones that I'm looking at here. Drew Lock to the New York Giants. That one doesn't really move the needle. Marcus Mariota going to Washington. Jacoby Brissett just signed with New England. So that one's kind of an interesting one because New England obviously traded away Mac Jones, which was rather funny.
Right, that quarterback class, once so highly touted, is certainly not looking like
it hasn't been all that great. Mitch Trubisky goes to Buffalo after he gets cut. Oh yeah, Russ is going to Pittsburgh. Let's talk about that, shall we? What an easy decision for a team to make, right? I mean, that the other team's going to have to pay this dude's $38 million contract. You sign him for the league minimum because you have to, right? There's no getting around that. And maybe there's some tread left on Russ. I think he certainly showed that there was some tread left. And if he would have, gotten along with Sean Payton, he's probably still in Denver.
Yeah, I don't know, right? There is some of that, right, getting along, all of that, but it does seem like Sean Payton has his ideal quarterback that he wants, and Russ didn't fit that mold, and so looking to move on there. And at least at this point, the Broncos have kind of committed to a full-on rebuild.
Tear it down. Yeah, they are tearing it down.
Instead of this patchwork thing that we've seen all the way since 2015, where the defense had been really good and they just couldn't seem to get the offensive side of the ball going, and so on and so forth for several years, where it was just kind of constantly, all right, let's try this guy and see if that fixes it.
Do you want to play a fun trivia game?
Sure. All
right. Since Peyton Manning retired, can you name the quarterback with the most wins for the Denver Broncos? The most QB wins for the Denver Broncos. Since Peyton Manning retired, the quarterback who has the most QB wins. Can you name who it is?
Yeah, I sure can. All right, up until you ask me the question.
Don't take too long because there's only two of us, so we can't fill dead air with chit-chatting with somebody else.
Right.
Take a stab at it.
Tick, 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 tick. The clock is always ticking. John Elway is not an option, right?
John Elway is not an option. This is since Peyton Manning retired, 2015. The last time the Broncos won a playoff game.
True. Let's go with, man, I want to be like, because there's been like 14 different quarterbacks.
There has been. We're starting to get to the Browns level of quarterback jersey here of late.
But I'm going to go with the guy that's I think started the most games in that aspect, and that was I believe that was Trevor Siemian.
Trevor Siemian is correct. Do you know what that number is?
Number of wins?
Yes.
Let's go with 11 or 12.
I have to double check here. I think it is 13.
Okay. Which I think puts him right around about a probably just over 500% win percentage as a starting quarterback for the Broncos.
13. So. Yep. 13 is the amount of quarterback wins that Trevor Siemian has. He is the leading quarterback wins guy since Peyton Manning retired.
Fair
for the
enough.
Denver Broncos.
Here's an interesting one for you. Sticking in that same vein of Denver Bronco quarterback trivia. Since Peyton Manning retired, can you name the starting quarterback that also is the hometown kid? So started a game for the Broncos, went to CU, played his high school ball in Colorado.
Oh, is that receiver that had to start at quarterback, wasn't it? For the COVID year? Wasn't that the weird COVID?
It is in the year you're thinking of, but it is not the guy you're thinking.
That was the year that we had 5 quarterbacks start a game because everybody got COVID. All the quarterbacks got COVID. All right.
It is even the game that you're thinking of, but you don't have the guy right.
Okay. I don't think I know. I know Philip Lindsay went to CU.
That is who it is.
Really? He started at quarterback?
Yes, because he took the first snap under center on that one, on kind of that wildcat formation, and then
so he gets a QB start.
Yes. So Philip Lindsay, running back, was a starting quarterback for the Broncos there as well. So there you go. Fun
Anyways,
fact.
It's gonna be it's been tough. I mean, we're coming up on 10 years since that Super Bowl, right? We just had Super Bowl 58. The Broncos last won a playoff game, which was Super Bowl 50. So we are coming up on a decade of just incompetence in Denver. And the most frustrating part about it is, one of our division rivals just keeps rattling off Super Bowl titles here. So, and they have the best player on earth. They have the best tight end on earth. It's really, really frustrating. But on the plus side, I no longer have to break up with the Broncos mid-season because I just start the season not caring.
Well, at this point, right? Like it's no longer that hope springs eternal. This one, we're like, yep, there's no hope for this year. We're planting
hope at all.
Planting for a couple of years down the road.
Let's look at fantasy stuff.
Right?
Not even going to get invested in this team. Just going to get invested in my fantasy teams.
Right. Exactly. So, it's interesting, right? Like you did bring up the quarterbacks there, and some of the kind of the perpetual starters the Broncos had. Talk about a guy that also keeps kind of just seemingly finding ways to stay in the league and all of that. Sam Darnold signing a one year $10 million deal with the Vikings, which is interesting to me, right? Like from the standpoint that he signs for 1 year, $10 million. Baker last year was playing on like $1.5 million contract.
Yeah, Baker got paid too, though.
Yeah, he did get paid this year.
Around. Jameis Winston signing a 1 year deal to go to Cleveland to be Deshaun Watson's backup. What do you think about that? Given the fact that look, we haven't seen Deshaun Watson play a full season, right? In 3-4 years. But one of that was a holdout, right? One of that was suspension. Okay. Last year was injury. Who knows what the future holds, but I think Cleveland understands we need to have somebody in here that can run the same offense as Deshaun Watson. And I think they think that's Jameis. At least that it's Jameis for the right price, right? I think that's the thinking. We need to get somebody in here who can run the same offense for the right price, and that's Jameis.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly some of that, but yeah, I mean that's also really rough to think about from the standpoint that when we've seen Jameis on the field and when we've seen Watson on the field, they are not anywhere really close to playing the game the same way, right? Like Deshaun, isn't afraid to get out of the pocket, move around, and go out and get 500 or 600 yards over the course of a season with his legs. Jameis is very much the pocket guy, and is just as prone to throwing touchdowns typically as he is to throwing the ball to the other team. So, whereas Deshaun tends to be a little bit more, not as turnover prone. So, trying to think of the best way to word that.
Just careful, a little more careful.
There we go. Does a little bit better job managing the ball there, and not creating turnovers. So, I don't know. I was one of those. I was really hoping to see the Browns bring back in Flacco, and just see how that could ride out there. And my apology, I did say that Baker playing for like the $1.5 million. That was incorrect. It was closer to about the $6.5 million for last season, but just figured I'd stat correct myself there as we're going along.
Still $6.5 million for a quarterback that won a playoff game.
Right.
How many teams want that? How many teams would sign up for that? My team would sign up for that.
Right. But not only won a division, won a playoff game.
Instead, we're paying $40 million for some dude to go play on somebody else's team.
That always reminds me of that scene from Moneyball, the where Brad Pitt's down there and they're doing that conversation with David Justice type of deal. And,
yeah.
You're paying me this much per season, so I think that is my role. Yeah. Well. No, let me tell you. The other team's paying half of your salary. That's what they think. That's what they think about you. So the Broncos were willing to eat a whole lot of money to have Russ play for somebody else.
Somebody else. They said, get out of here. Who knows? I hope it works out for him. I really do. I don't mind Russ. I think he got the short end of the stick here in Denver. I think he played well enough. I just think he had an inept first-time head coach his first year, right? And that was a top-down problem. And then the Broncos ownership kind of overcorrects, right? And brings in Sean Payton, who is very much my way or the highway. Russ isn't his dude. And he got a bad shake. I just think he got a bad shake.
I mean, there's some of that, but there's also some of that too that, right? Like, I don't know. I'm willing to. I'd be willing to just chalk it up to both sides and seeing the having philosophical differences at this point, and at that point, knowing that the relationship isn't going to work. How are you? Where do you want to proceed, and how do you want to move forward? And so that's kind of where I see that more so.
Do you think we've seen kind of the end of this era of signing a quarterback before you see what he can do for you, to like a crazy extension?
No, we just saw that happen with Cousins.
Yes, but you're right, and that kind of ruins my thought here. But it feels like teams are less likely to. Hopefully, teams learn. Hey, we saw it happen with Russ. We're seeing it happen with Deshaun Watson, right? The guy I just talked about, who they paid him all of this guaranteed money. At least Kirk Cousins has played on his guaranteed deals, right? This is really the last year was the first time that he really missed any time, right? Yeah. And it was an Achilles, so it's not like it's a soft tissue thing. Like, it's an Achilles. It sucks. Modern medicine's great though, and you can come back from an Achilles injury usually, just as fine as you were before it. But yeah, I wonder if teams are going to start to shy away from these. And yes, his deal was a lot, but it wasn't, $300 million. It wasn't $50 million a year for him. It's $25 million a year, right? $100 million guaranteed. It can go up to what, 180? Did you say?
It's the contract's 4 years for 180, so $45 million a year is what that averages out to be.
Which is a lot. That is a lot.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, maybe Atlanta's just going to Atlanta all over the place. And maybe they should have learned from teams like Denver and Cleveland about what you should pay a quarterback.
Right. But there is a point there too. Like, what do you, when quarterbacks hit the open market, it's typically not because they're, because there's they're not often the times you see the quarterback hit the market where there's a, bidding frenzy. And now you've got all of these teams kind of going through and really seeking out the services of these guys, right? Typically it's a trade and go through, and it does make you wonder how much of that the trade negotiations are part of also working out a contract negotiation, because how many of these guys are signing no trade clauses into their contracts and things like that. So, in order to get a guy to waive it, renegotiating the contract along the way with the trade options as well. So,
yeah,
it does make you wonder how much of that comes into play too.
All right. Done talking about these quarterbacks. Is there any other deal that's got you excited, at least in terms of fantasy impact, or maybe not so excited? I think there's one that I could point to that I know Kevin would probably have some thoughts on, and that is Deontay Johnson going to Carolina. Like, how much does that impact your thoughts? If you're in a dynasty league, right? And Deontay Johnson was a kind of a good piece to get in those dynasty leagues, right? If I'm correct in remembering, kind of so year last year, I think I remember Kevin being very frustrated with Deontay Johnson last year, but now he goes to Carolina, where they're new head coach, second-year quarterback who didn't look all that good last year, right? So it's a new offense for him. It's there's kind of new beginnings for everybody, but certainly it doesn't give you the warm fuzzies that he's going to Bryce Young and not CJ Stroud, right?
Potentially, right? But if he's going to Houston, right, like Tank Dell likely will return to form here.
Just from the quarterback standpoint is what of the rookie the two rookie quarterbacks that were taken early last year, 1-2 picks. You would rather have a receiver, because again, right, receiver is so quarterback dependent. We were talking about it earlier with Atlanta, right? What's Drake London going to be now that he's got a quarterback that is competent, right? That they have finally seemingly competent quarterback play coming. So we didn't really get a good sample of what Bryce Young was last year, because that team was just so bad around him, and he wasn't very good either, if we're being honest, right?
Right.
But Deontay Johnson, I know a lot of people were really high on when he was in Pittsburgh, and yes, he also struggled with the fact that there wasn't great quarterback play there. But now he goes to a team where, man, what do you do with Deontay Johnson if you've got him in a dynasty league right now?
Well, I mean, it's one of those that you kind of take stock as to what else is around Carolina, right? And there's not really anything else in the wide receiver room that makes you feel warm and fuzzy. So they go out, they get a guy that has fairly decent route running ability, is a guy that can be a target monster for a young quarterback to soak up targets, things like that, where we've seen when Deontay Johnson can handle 140, 150 targets over the course of a year and be productive with that kind of workload. So, 2 seasons ago, right, the very down year from a fantasy perspective, 0 touchdowns, and it was a very just big anomaly as far as touchdown regression and just the amount of targets and how that works out. You would have expected to see a guy fall in the end zone at least once during the course of the season. Last year, we saw that rebound a little bit, but he also missed some time, was injured. Quarterback play was really kind of all over the place in Pittsburgh last year. You had the kind of just a seemingly rotating door at quarterback in Pittsburgh for last year. So I can see where this might give pause to a lot of folks, but at the same time, right, like Deontay Johnson isn't a guy that you were having to after the last 2 seasons, and a guy that you're necessarily have to really overpay for in startup drafts. He's 27 now, so kind of that luster is kind of worn off from the early part of the career and how the dynasty plays out there. So it's one of those that you'll hang on to him if you got him, because the trade market's probably not that pretty soft out there on that one. And now you've got a guy that is the number 1 wide receiver on his team, and very well could be the guy that soaks up 140, 150 targets. So that kind of volume's opportunity. and there's only so many guys that will see that many targets over the course of a season. So
I think you've probably settled down a lot of Deontay Johnson owners who are trying to figure out what they should do. They should listen to you.
Well, fair enough. That's why we do this, to try and get people to listen. So, yeah, I mean, it's one of those that when it's all said and done, there'll be a little bit of, hesitation there, but Adam Thielen is long in the tooth at this point, right? He's not a guy that's going to soak up 140 targets, but he can be a red zone threat. Okay.
Yeah.
DJ Chark has had several injury issues over the last few seasons and is more of a downfield threat. So, now you've got a guy in Deontay Johnson that can be the possession guy like Thielen, but has, a little bit better route running ability at this point in his career, and a little bit more burst.
That's good. All right, I got one more for you, and it's a game that we're gonna play.
All right, I'm ready.
Of the running backs here that I've written down in our show document, which nobody else can see, so bear with us as we do this. These running backs that have found new homes. You're doing a startup draft. So let's just narrow it down to we'll go to these 5. I'm going to do 5 running backs: Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, Josh Jacobs, DeAndre Swift. You are starting a team from scratch. You have to draft one of those 5 guys. Who are you drafting first?
At this point, it's probably either Jacobs or Swift is where I'm leaning. So, and honestly, it's probably going to be Jacobs. Green Bay utilizes the running back quite a bit in there, so we'll likely see some good red zone usage from him. We'll see he's the better of the 2 pass catching running backs on the roster, and Aaron Jones has certainly made a lot of hay in Matt LaFleur's offense, catching the ball out of the backfield. So that's probably the route that I would go. And then probably would lean towards Swift in Chicago, just kind of a similar deal where Chicago likes to use the running backs and likes to run the ball. And whereas Eckler to Washington, again, right, we touched on that earlier in my thoughts on Eckler and a Cliff Kingsbury offense. Derrick Henry to Baltimore, again, right, there's going to be some good movement there, and there's going to be some good production there. But yeah, again, that's one of those I do worry about. Are we going to see the Derrick Henry that's going to get 14 or 15 touchdowns on this? Or are we going to see a Derrick Henry that's probably closer to 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns?
Yeah.
Saquon to Philly, same type of thing, right? Jalen Hurts doesn't really check the ball down, doesn't really throw the ball to running backs inside the 2 or 3 yard line. It's the brotherly shove that's coming into play there. So Saquon red zone usage down, and where we've seen Saquon really make his hay for fantasy purposes is catching the ball and being a guy that goes out there and gets 80 receptions a year. I don't know that we're going to see 80 targets go to the running back in Philadelphia this upcoming season.
All right, so I'm with you on the top one. I think Josh Jacobs in Green Bay is the one that has the most intrigue for me. I'm very much with you there. I, however, will differ on the second one. And I'm a little more intrigued about Derrick Henry going to Baltimore than I am DeAndre Swift going to Chicago, simply because I know what's happening with the quarterback, as we talk about this on March 12th, simply because I know what's happening with quarterback in Baltimore more than I do know what's happening with the quarterback in Chicago, right? Like if Chicago goes and gets a rookie quarterback, maybe DeAndre Swift's stock goes up a little bit more for me because they probably need to run the football a little bit more. However, I think that they'll be chasing points. And so, maybe so much he'll get the pass catching work of a check down, right? You've heard me say it once, you've heard me say it 1,000 times. A young quarterback's best friend is a tight end, or I'll amend this, a good pass catching tight end or a good pass catching running back, any check down option that they have to help, slow the game down a little bit and at least get defensive linemen out of their face so quickly. So I think I would go, as we talk about this on March 12th, I think I go Derrick Henry 2. So I'm Josh Jacobs 1, Derrick Henry 2, and then I think it is a smorgasbord after that. And I'll give you Swift at 3 because I do think that he has some value on his own, regardless of what the quarterback situation is. But Eckler to Washington, Eckler in Washington does not give me the feel goods. And for all of the reasons that you said about Saquon Barkley going to Philadelphia, if they need to get 2 yards, it's not going to Saquon Barkley. It is the brotherly shove, right? If they're, goal line work, Saquon Barkley is not the guy. So he better hope that, they are 7 or 8 yards away. They're taking their first and goals from the 7 or 8 yard line. Because if it gets close to the goal line, you're not going to change what you're doing. If you can get the 1 or 2 yards, you take the 1 or 2 yards, and that's what Philadelphia does, and it doesn't include a running back to do that. So, yeah, I'm with you. I think Jacobs is the most intriguing as we sit here on March 12th of those 5 that we talked about, and Derrick Henry for me is the next best option.
Fair enough. I mean, I can see it. I'm just not looking to go that route, right? Again, I do worry about kind of how that workload's going to be.
I'm with you though too. I think 1,208 is more likely than 14 or 15 touchdowns. I think 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns is way more likely than him doing 1,200 and even 14 or 15 touchdowns, right? Lamar is still a threat to run the football. Right. That is just a thing.
Right.
And he's proven that he's got 2 tight ends now that can catch the ball, right? Mark Andrews comes back and is healthy. Likely is healthy. There are options through the passing game. So, you bring in a running back like Derrick Henry to free up the passing game and hopefully give Lamar a little bit more time. But also because you can run the wheels off of Derrick Henry. He's proven that he can be a feature back in this league. In a league that no longer features backs, he can still do it.
Right. And that's kind of the, typically we see where Derrick Henry's really good is, lining up 8-9 yards behind the line of scrimmage, 8-9 yards behind the snap there and fully hitting a head of steam coming down there. And where do we see Lamar Jackson at his most effective is in the shotgun formation. So there's some of that's going to be kind of required to figure out there. And I do almost have some concerns from the aspect of, right, you remember when DeMarco Murray went to Philadelphia as part of Chip Kelly's offense and how that experiment, on paper looked like it might have worked out okay. I'm almost curious if we're going to see a similar type of situation there where DeMarco Murray, tremendous north-south runner and could hit a goal, one cut and go, and just move a pile. And in an offense where, lining up in shotgun and really looking more of an east-west type of deal there, and how that plays out. So there is some of that does give me some pause and maybe a little bit of concern.
Great point.
So
that's a great point.
So, but I who knows? It very well could be, right. Could be the fact that, it opens up the passing game, like you said, and now we see a little bit more over the top, and now we see a little bit more red zone touches, and at that point you get inside the 5 or 10 yard line. Right. Who's to say that they don't just go under center and let Derrick Henry, get 3 carries and try and pick up 5 yards. Right.
Try and stop it.
Right. Good luck. Many have tried. And so yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot to that that comes to play. Some other trades happened as well. Jerry Jeudy, no longer a Bronco.
Good riddance.
Yeah, former first round pick traded for a 5 and 6, going to the Browns. So we'll see how that plays out and how that works out there for them.
You brought up an interesting question in our group chat about Jerry Jeudy. Do you remember what that was?
I do, and so it's one of those that there's a lot of the there's always that talk around the draft bust this type of year and who's the biggest bust, or this player was a bust, or any of that type of stuff. And at this point, right, when a team moves on from you as a first round pick and sends you off on your way to now become kind of that journeyman, that kind of brings up the questions of, was this a bust, right? Like CeeDee Lamb taken right behind Jerry Jeudy in the same draft class to Dallas, and we've seen CeeDee Lamb emerge and really become a one of the really, really good, if not even one of the best wide receivers in the league at this point, right? Like, certainly an argument to be made for that. But the question at that point comes down to, had the Broncos drafted CeeDee Lamb instead of Jerry Jeudy there, would the results have been the same type of production there? And my contention would be that it was. And some of that is the standpoint that these teams that draft that, and while the player gets labeled a bust, maybe it's as much on the organization that drafted them to from a player development standpoint.
Yes. The question that you posed was, was CD, would he be the bust that Jeudy was? And I think, in a position like wide receiver where you are so dependent upon quality quarterback play, right? We've been talking about it all show, that Jerry Jeudy hasn't had a fair shake when it comes to, quarterback play. But when he has had good quarterback play, he hadn't taken advantage of it either, right? So I think the Broncos scouting department swung and missed, right? I think CeeDee Lamb is still on the Denver Broncos roster if that's the way that it shook out, right? If they take CeeDee instead of Jerry Jeudy. But I also think that Jerry Jeudy probably stays with the Cowboys because he will have had a quarterback that, believes in him and will throw him the football, and a team that, doesn't rely on him. Not that the Broncos ever did rely on him, but, Judy's biggest problem was likely his because it was the drops, right? It was the drops, and then it was his attitude, and that seemed to be something that, attitude isn't something that seems to be CD's problem, right? He's been fired up before and has gotten into it on the sideline. What football player hasn't? Hell, Travis Kelce tried to assault his coach in the Super Bowl, right? Like, it's a passionate game. It's a high emotion game, and sometimes those emotions boil over. But I don't think. I think if the roles were reversed, and this might be contradictory to what I was saying earlier, but I think if the roles were reversed, Jerry Jeudy probably isn't still with the Cowboys, right? I think Jerry Jeudy's problems are Jerry Jeudy's problems, whereas CeeDee Lamb's successes are not strictly because of his environment.
Right. No, and I think that there's certainly a lot to that, right? Like there is an onus on both parts to it, right? Like, obviously the player has to put in the work and improve on the craft, and just like any profession, right? Like have to kind of constantly moving the stick, so to speak, and getting better as time progresses, right? But there's also some of that does beg the question on, right, the teams that we see that kind of seemingly always constantly hit on their draft picks and always seem to draft really well, that we don't really see the busts come through there, right? Like some of that begs the question of how much of that is some of the locker room presence and some of the culture of the organization and in that locker room, and how much of it is on some of the player development and bringing players along and bringing the talent to the surface, and then how much of it is on the player there as well, right? And it's kind of that perfect mix in there where it's kind of that three-prong side of things that there's a lot to it that's more so than just the guy's a bust and leave it as simple as that.
Yeah.
So long way around to say it's more to than just saying a guy's a bust.
But also, I'm not upset to see him leave.
Right. And it'll be interesting to see how the rest of this, shakes out for the Broncos, right? Like they've got a lot of rebuilding to do. I know a lot of fans here in Denver were very upset when Justin Simmons was released.
Yeah. Hey, what's worst case scenario for you with the Broncos with whatever they do at the quarterback position? Because I have a worst case scenario.
JJ McCarthy.
That's worst case scenario.
Yes. Like, and I keep hearing lots of things out there where a lot of these folks are talking about that should be the guy, and that's who the Broncos need to go out and get, because he can run Sean Payton's offense and this, that, and the other, right? By the way, this draft class is starting to become like eerily similar to that draft class from a few years ago that featured a ton of what we thought were going to be really, really good quarterbacks. And
is that the Darnold's class, right? It's Darnold, Rosen.
No, it's even more recent than that. That would be the Trevor Lawrence class, the Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, Justin Fields. Like this draft class and that draft class are when I'm kind of going through and doing the comparables on it and how people are speaking about those draft classes going into the draft. There's a whole lot of eerie similarities coming through on that, right?
Nah, I don't. Yeah, I don't like it. I hate that my team is in need of a quarterback, and this is the draft class that's come up. Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot to that, right? And there's probably some decent guys that can kind of bridge the way for you, potentially develop into it, but they're older guys, right? Like,
and look, older guys and Sean Payton apparently don't get along. So,
but you say that, but then Drew Brees was an old guy in the league for quite a while.
That's true. But he was Sean's guy.
It's true.
And when he got to Sean, he wasn't an old guy. He was experienced, right? He had some years there in San Diego. They were still San Diego then. But yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out and what moves are made here on draft night and leading up to it. But there's this is one of those that at this point, I'd be okay if they even just punted the ball down the road one more season and really, look ahead towards the future and try and build around that, because some of the notes, the key leavings on that, like, there's some holes now in that offensive line, and that offensive line for, its issues last year was still probably a top 10 offensive line in the league.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of kind of holes there. You've got to rebuild the wide receiver room at this point. You've got holes kind of all along the defense at this point. So there's holes all along that. This is going to be and probably should be a multi-year rebuild.
All right.
Sorry to be the bearer of bad news.
Nah, at least they're doing it. Like we've been a meddling team for the last 10 years. Like burn it down so we can build it back up.
Can we even say that we're a middling team when we have a hard time getting to 500?
Yes, but at least they're committing to the. You're right. That's an insult to middling teams.
Correct.
To consider the Broncos in that, but at least now it's apparent. Like just burn it down, and see what rises.
Absolutely. So, any any other kind of thoughts out there as far as your free agency or any of the thoughts as we start looking towards the draft?
No, it'll be, I mean, look, there shouldn't be too many surprises. League year is tomorrow, so there shouldn't be too many more surprises, too many big names. I think there might be one or two still out there that I'm not thinking of that will find a home, but I think we're past the whirlwind surprises,
Right.
at least.
Some guys that I'll be interested to see kind of where they end up and where it shakes out would be Calvin Ridley, still out there on the free agency market, as well as the Hollywood Brown is out there as well. So there's still some really good players on the out there and all of that, but just it'll be interesting to see how the rest of this thing kind of shakes out here.
Yeah, I think those are, at least fantasy purpose wise, I think those are the big ones. There's a lot of, defensive guys that I think will be interesting to see where they land. That will have an impact, right? Like there's going to be some defensive players. I think of a Chase Young, right? Mm-hmm. You mentioned him, Justin Simmons, Jadeveon Clowney still has some tread on the tires. Yeah, those are a few of the names that I think will have an impact wherever they go. It's just not for fantasy purposes.
Yeah, and actually, the team that really kind of surprised me that stood out there was Miami going out and doing some of the signings that they did, and bringing in some of these guys on the defensive side of the ball. So
yeah, we were talking about that, and I think that's Miami recognizes they are in a window of opportunity, and offense certainly wasn't their issue last year. So get it corrected, right? Try to bring in some pieces, address the needs that you had on the other side of the ball, and hopefully make a run at things here.
Right. I mean, because they went out and brought in some dudes, so we'll see how that plays out and how that plays down the stretch here. See if that changes their fate there at the end of the season. But
yeah.
Anyway, I was gonna say that's kind of everything I've got on there. Any final thoughts out there for the viewers and listeners?
That's it for me. This is an interesting. I say an interesting. This is kind of that again. We get to talk about the NFL for these couple of days. Don't forget to fill out your brackets because Selection Sunday is coming. Absolutely.
And I'm still in favor that there's a couple of days out of the year from a sports perspective that really probably should be national holidays.
Yeah, I think obviously the first weekend of the NCAA tournament, right?
Mm-hmm. Really Thursday and Friday. Yeah, put that into place. And
I think if you live wherever you live and it's opening day for your baseball team, I think that should be a holiday. I think opening day should be a holiday, like your home opener, right? Not just opening day, but like your home opener.
You and I definitely differ on that opinion, but
I think baseball, I just think it's so much fun. It should be celebrated. It is like the beginning of summer, right? Like it is the welcoming of summer.
Fair enough. And then the day after,
day after the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Yep. No argument here.
So, absolutely. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us. And we'll be back next week. We'll hope to see Kevin back next week here as well. And, we'll be starting to, shift gears here a little bit and talking far more about the draft and really starting to look at prospects and how that might come to play and kind of our thoughts on guys heading into draft night and all of that. But that's going to do it for us. You can find us on all the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok at Good Old Boys FF. Head over to the YouTube channel, click the subscribe button at youtube.com/@GoodOldBoysFF. He's Alex. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe. Toodaloo.